Concerning the police arrest of the 5 executives of the Next Digital Limited and Apple Daily, they were alleged to have committed national security offense under Article 29 of the National Security Law, which is the collusion with a foreign country or with external elements to endanger national security. Specifically, I understand that the articles and the news report concerned suggest such 5 executives made a request to foreign country to impose the sanction on the Hong Kong SAR and the officials. Lately, I remember in 2019, concerning the Australia broadcast company, the ABC, was subject to a covered search of its premise by the police for more than 8 hours, seizing the documents concerned over the illegal publication of the confidential information, as argued by the Australian police. The Australian police argued that the ABC was in breach of the Crimes Act 1914. It was clearly out of the national security concern. So, for this Australian example, we can see that even in the West, like the Australia, enforcement agency, like the police, will still conduct the search according to the laws. Also, I remember earlier in 2011, editor-in-chief of the now defunct News of the World, Mr. Andy Coulson, was also arrested and imprisoned for 18 months for an infamous incident like the phone surveillance of the royal couples, Prince Charles families, the London police, and even the relatives of the deceased or under the terrorist attack of the London Underground earlier. And it demonstrates that press freedom is never above the law. So we could understand there could be similar examples that happen in the UK, that even though the West has long championed the freedom of press, we can understand that there is still bottom line, crossing of which will be subject to legal consequences as provided in the laws of that certain countries. And it's very important that a balance has to be struck between the maintaining of the national security and, of course, the freedom of press. It's also been codified in our basic law, Article 39, that the Hong Kong people will enjoy the freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of assembly. But, of course, the exercise of which has to be subject to the local legislation. Indeed, in Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, it states that the exercise of the freedom of press and freedom of speech, freedom of expression, etc., has to be subject to certain restrictions, namely the protection of the national security or of the public order, amongst the others. So we can see this even in the ICCPR, well observed by countries in the West, in the US. We understand that the freedom of press, amongst the other kinds of freedom, have to be subject to the national security concern by certain countries. Similarly, in the United Kingdom, I understand there are also certain similar restrictions of the exercise of the freedom of expression and the freedom of press as provided in Article 10 of the Human Rights Act in 1998. In Article 10, subsection 2, it stipulates that the exercise of such freedoms also have to come with certain duties and responsibilities, that they have to be subject to restriction, as I've mentioned, among others, like the national security, the territorial integrity, and of course, the rights of the others. So we can see, as you've mentioned, that the exercise of the freedom of press is never absolute. And so in this regard, the spreading of the information as alert by the police concerning the Next magazine or the Apple Daily requesting the foreign country or institution to impose sanction on next-day SAR actually has no relevance to the freedom of press or expression. It's like the hated speech, nobody would allow the hated speech to be published under the guise of the freedom of expression, as they are criminally sanctioned by countries in the West. So the media exposing or publishing such unlawful reports or articles that were criminally culpable in accordance with national security law or the laws in Hong Kong should not be excused. Ironically, some may say Apple is rotten, and actually such a rotten apple clearly isn't a good example in our local media ecosystem. So the arrest by the police of the Next magazine going against Apple Daily is actually no different from the police going after any criminals in Hong Kong, because the arrest made strictly according to Article 43 of the National Security Law, it demonstrates an example of the rule of law is actually well in place in Hong Kong. In our national security law also provides, in Article 4, it says that human rights shall be respected and protected in safeguarding the national security in Hong Kong SAR. So from the legal perspective, we could understand the exercise of the enforcement action against the four national security offences were not contradictory to the safeguarding of the human rights. More importantly, by going after the bad apples in the media industry could well facilitate a healthy development of the media industry itself and facilitate those who exercise the press freedom, so that they will not be hijacked by those who just abuse this right to achieve the certain political gain for those in power in the media industry. It shows that the media ethics have to be strictly respected, and journalists should produce and publish fact-based reports. And even for those opinion articles, they should make sure that the articles published should have balanced views. And of course, in the compliance with our local laws, nobody would wish to pay for the newspaper or reports that come with unfounded lies, conspiracies, or plots that deceive or mislead the public to achieve certain political ideals that were subsidized by some of the opposition or even the foreign countries. That is the last thing that I think most Hong Kong people would wish to see. So I think it may be a lesson that the press workers could pay attention to.